Jonathan Gruber was one of the central architects of the Affordable Care Act, better known as Obamacare, and hailed as the crowning achievement of the current administration. But now that Republicans have won control of the Senate and expanded their ranks in the House, the law is in the crosshairs. But that's not the only reason Gruber's name is back in the news. For the second time this year, he's under fire over videotaped comments that surfaced online. The latest uproar stems from a 2013 panel discussion where Gruber says the law was deliberately drafted to ensure the health care mandate would not be classified as a tax.
If you had a law which said healthy people are going to pay in, it made explicit that healthy people pay in and sick people get money, it would not have passed. Okay, just like the lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. And basically, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever. But basically, that was really, really critical to getting the thing to pass.
Jonathan Gruber is here. And I know, Jonathan, you've been under a lot of fire for that, and you've gotten a lot of nasty, upsetting emails. But your larger point, I looked at a bunch of this economic panel today, was about how much politics you have to play in order to get something done. So do you essentially stand by what you said?
I mean, I apologize for the terms I used. I expressed myself very poorly. I think the point I was trying to make, Emily, is that essentially a very sensible way to do this law would have been to literally copy what we did in Massachusetts. There was one important difference. In Massachusetts, we actually gave poor people money and said, here's the money you get to get health insurance. At the federal level, we couldn't classify it as spending. That's too politically unpopular. Going back to Presidents Clinton and Bush, there's been a move essentially to make social policy through the tax code rather than through direct spending. And I was just pointing out that.
Yeah, and so your point was that there was an intentional obfuscation, even though that is essentially what ended up happening. You're giving money to poor people, and other people are paying in, the rich people are paying in. Essentially,
the core of the Affordable Care Act is to make health insurance affordable for lower income people. It's politically impossible to do that directly in this environment. And so for a number of presidents in the past 20 or 30 years, that's been done through changing the tax code, which work effectively. And I was just making the point that that's sort of a more indirect way to do it.
By the way, have you heard from Obama?
No, I've not.
So we actually called you last week because we wanted you to come in and talk about what is going to happen now that the Congress is essentially Republican. There was all that talk about, completely dialing it back, breaking it apart. But now it's also, there's a Supreme Court case that's pending going forward about these federal subsidies that you were just talking about. What's going to happen? And is there a way to kind of scuttle around that decision by making new laws in Congress?
Well, let's talk about two separate issues. So one is congressional control. With congressional control, really nothing fundamental, I think, is going to change. It's very important to remember there's three fundamental pieces to this law. There's changes to insurance regulations so that insurers can no longer discriminate against the sickest Americans. There's a mandate to make it possible for insurers to stay in business under those conditions. And there's subsidies to make health insurance affordable. Mm-hmm. As long as the individual mandate, the subsidies, and the insurance market regulations stay in place, the law works. There are other pieces which are controversial and less central to the law, like the employer mandate or the medical device tax.
Okay, but going back to what you said, because in states where they don't have their own exchanges, right, like we do here in Massachusetts, that's what this Supreme Court case is about.
That's what the lawsuit's about.
They threatened to lose health care for tens of thousands of people because they didn't go ahead and put their own exchanges in place, state by state. There's 36 states that did not do that.
Right. So on the congressional side, they can't really attack those fundamental pillars of the law. The Supreme Court case does attack a fundamental pillar of the law, which is it says, because of really a misreading of the law, it says that the plaintiffs claim through a misreading of the law that states that don't run their own exchanges shouldn't deliver subsidies to people, which is patently at odds with what the law is trying to do. And moreover, this isn't the Constitution. We can ask the framers. If you ask the people who wrote the law, this is not what they intended.
Okay, so you think that the Supreme Court will see the intention?
I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it would be an enormous tragedy if they didn't. Any sensible reading of this law shows the intention. Let me give you one simple example, Emily. In the law, it says you don't have to buy health insurance if it costs more than 8% of your income. There's a mandate exemption. If we get rid of these subsidies, 99% of the people who get these subsidies could not buy health insurance for less than 8% of income. Why would they put in a clause that applied to the entire population? It makes no sense.
To kill the whole thing.
Basically, it would effectively kill the whole thing. If you get rid of these subsidies, then 99% of people can't afford health insurance, and the law unravels. Why would Congress write a law that unraveled itself?
Aren't there some other things that Congress can do right now, though, to mitigate some of the bad feelings here, like get rid of the medical device tax and that kind of thing?
Well, the big issues, the two big issues Congress is discussing is the medical device tax and the employer mandate, both of which are essentially revenue-raising functions. Congress can easily get rid of them. In fact, it only needs 50 votes, not 60, because they can do it through budget reconciliation. The question is, well, if you get rid of that, where's the money going to come from?
Yeah, because it's $30 billion.
$30 billion medical device, more than $100 billion employer mandate. So if you're going to punch a $150 billion hole into the financing of the law, that's, for a Republican Party that, talks about how they're deficit hawks, where's that money coming from?
So, I mean, all the talk, though, you've heard more of it than I did over the last 2 years about what was going to happen when we finally got a Republican Congress. Will they try to dismantle this? They
will not try to dismantle the fundamental core, which is the three pillars on which it stands. They will try to go after these peripheral pieces, but I think the much bigger risk is the court case than the Congress at this point.
Are they hearing from constituents? They must be. There must be people who wouldn't have any kind of health care were it not for this.
I think that this comes to a master strategy of the Republican Party, which is to confuse people enough about the law so they don't understand that the subsidies they're getting are because of the law. It goes back to the old Jimmy Kimmel bit where he asked people if they liked Obamacare and they said no, and he asked people if they liked the Affordable Care Act and they said yes. There are now 8 million people getting subsidies. The number of uninsured in America is down by 10 million people. You'd think these people would be standing up and shouting. I think they just don't realize it's Obamacare.
By the way, have you learned the lesson about there's videotaped everywhere?
I have certainly learned my lesson.
And anything you tweet out is there forever.
I don't even have a Twitter, but now I know I can not only not tweet, I can't speak.
Okay, Jonathan Gruber, thanks for coming on today.
You bet. Thanks for having me.